we're going to get into a little bit of what happened so far this season. Usually on these Monday episodes, we go into question marks, exclamation points from what happened the past week. We don't have a game to talk about. So we're going to take a little look just back at what's happened so far this season. John, I'm going to let you get into it here.
Yeah, first thing for me that's been exciting to see throughout the season is how well the offensive line has gelled together, considering that it's a group that Iapani Lalaulu, the center, the only guy coming back as a starter on there. Really good to see just the amount of chemistry that they've had. Poncho has been a guy, and this is something that Dan talked about last week in his media availability after I asked him, was because, he's the center, he's the guy setting the protections. It's been so key to have him back as that returner. And it's really brought everything together. Dante Moore has only been sacked once this season. To go into a place like Penn State against the edge rushers that they have, deny Dennis Sutton, one of the best in the country, and come out of there not getting sacked at all. Really good stuff from the offensive line. This is what you have to do to compete at the highest level, and they've kept their quarterback very safe back there. Yeah,
just in general, too, the Ducks' ability to really turn over a lot of spots here in this team and not see that much time spent. I mean, all the time they spent on connection was in fall camp. And a little bit in the spring, but these guys have talked about how important that time was. And yeah, I mean, that's obviously super important for the offensive line, where it didn't look great for the Ducks at the start of the season last year. This season, it's looked phenomenal. That's really important. That's a big part of why Dante's been so good. I really want to get into just the fact that these freshmen have really pulled their weight. When we talk about the fact there's so much turnover, a big part of that is a really strong recruiting class that the Ducks have brought in here. It was one of the top in the country. We just got to start with Decorian Moore here. Was the number one wide receiver in the country coming in here. And, like we said last week, this kid, when you're a 5-star, you have a certain amount of expectation attached to your name. You say, hey, this kid could be great. He's come in and he's been phenomenal immediately. The speed off the line and just his ability to provide an option that Dante Moore trusts. You look back at that Penn State game, when it gets down to crunch time, there's one guy. And we said, hey, is that Sadiq? No, it's Decorian Moore. He still trusts some of these guys, but he is the clutch option. And that's unbelievable to see from an 18-year-old. He just looks unbelievably fluid. These running backs, too, the Thunder and Lightning, Davison and Hill really showed out in that Penn State game. And it's a big part of why we'll get into Mekhi Hughes and that decision to redshirt that we heard on Wednesday from Dan Lanning. Just the fact, with the corners, the amount of freshmen that have stepped up for this team are phenomenal, John.
Yeah, we can get into some of these other guys here in a second, but just to start with Moore, how quickly he's established himself as not only a key part of this offense, looked like a gadget piece early, getting some of those kind of designs schemed up for him to just get the ball in his hands and let him create, but he is really taken over as a true number one X receiver for this team. And is doing things that you wouldn't expect from an 18-year-old. I mean, the fact that he's leading this team in receptions, leading this team in yards, went into Penn State and had 7 receptions in that game, in the biggest game, and is making plays like the scramble drill to set up the touchdown. Jordan Davison's touchdown in that late in that one, where he has the awareness to his route isn't open. He gets upfield, gets his eyes back to the quarterback, and then makes a phenomenal catch, strong hands catch. Had the one off the bobble earlier. I brought this up when I was on Odds and Audibles last week talking to Eric Scopel, but it's hard not to compare him to some of the best receivers that we see, in the NFL, that we've seen in college football with the skill set that he has. I brought up the name Jamar Chase in terms of just they have play styles that really remind me each other of a lot. Chase a little bit bigger. I think he's like an inch taller, listed like 5 pounds heavier, but most of these guys in that like 6 foot-ish, like 200 pound-ish kind of range. But really explosive athletes who are stronger than you'd expect. We see it in Decorian Moore's blocking. Jamar Chase breaks tackles all the time, but are also very elusive after the catch. And then the way that Decorian Moore can go up and catch these back shoulder balls, that's what really made me start thinking of Chase specifically. But just it's ridiculously impressive for an 18-year-old kid. And it's so exciting to see how much better he's going to continue to get, as we go forward. He has skill sets that, like you said, use that 5-star talent for a reason, and it's shown up. He's more athletic than these other players. He moves differently out there, and he's just better. It has shown. He's one of the most exciting players in the country.
It's one of those ones where you watch the tape and say, yeah, this kid's just better. It's important to note, like in the past, Oregon's looked at some of these big X receivers and gone to a bigger guy. Like last year, the big guy was Trayshawn Holden. Then the year before, it was a guy like Troy Franklin. Decorian Moore is not as big as those guys, but he is that option. He's the guy who, they can look to make a contested catch. You look at some of the stuff, the Penn State game, what stands out to me The scramble drill was really impressive. I think of the bobbling catch. That one, just the ability that the level of focus is something that takes years, honestly, and the speed of development with this kid. And you know, this is where we can get into some of these other guys, because the level that they're already at is unbelievable. The level to which these guys are getting snaps. Oregon's 2 corners are a redshirt freshman who sat out, I think, all of last season with an injury in Ife Obadegu, and then a true freshman in Brandon Finney Jr. They trust these kids because they've been able to take those steps so quickly. And that's a credit to Oregon's program. That's a credit to how quickly they've been able to grasp what the Ducks are doing here.
Yeah, across the board, it goes to what Dan constantly says. If like you're good enough, you're old enough, you trust those guys that are on the field are on the field for a reason. It's because he trusts them to be able to execute the offense, execute the defense, and do what they're supposed to do out there. You know, you look at these running backs, these cornerbacks, and you say freshmen, but they're not playing like freshmen, so it hasn't really mattered. And no one has quite challenged some of that inexperience in terms of, I think Indiana will be a very good challenge for that inexperience in the secondary. I think that we'll get into their passing attack and how explosive and how good that's been this season for them. But yeah, this Dan has built this team with high level recruiting, and it's shown up immediately because these guys are coming on campus. They're getting that, you know, that early enrollment, that practice in the winter and spring to get them on track to be ready for by the time fall comes. And by the time fall comes, yeah, they're college football players. They're not just freshmen anymore. De'Aaron Hill Juniors and Jordan Davis, and these guys aren't freshmen. These are just some of the better running backs that college football has this season.
All right, let's get you into your second exclamation point, John.
All right, for me, the second thing is just how consistent the offense has been in terms of its ability to stay on schedule. I think Dante Moore has obviously been a huge part of that. He just keeps things moving. He doesn't put the ball in danger. He doesn't take sacks. He avoids negative plays largely, and keeps the offense, you know, on track. To pick up these short conversions on second and third down. The ground game has obviously helped with that as well. But then it's the ability to do that, be consistent in that. And then when you do have that opportunity to hunt those shots and be able to take those shots down the field and find those explosive plays, whether that's in the pass game, in the run game. Will Stein says he likes to take about 2 shots per quarter. And they've been able to do that, but still maintain that consistent ability to move the ball down the field and not feel like they're only hunting those big plays and aren't able to. Then they're getting behind the sticks because all of a sudden you're taking sacks or you're throwing interceptions or big incompletions and just stuff that's doing nothing for the offense. They're constantly just moving the ball forward and able to work defenses. It looks like a unit that will succeed in the situations you're going to find yourself in the postseason.
Yeah, and the big thing about those shot plays is you can tell sometimes that Oregon's looking for a shot. Maybe the Ducks are in second and short, or they got a holding or a false start and they're in. Or an offside, and they're in, 1st and 5, and they say, "Hey, this is an opportunity." But all these guys understand that doesn't mean the ball has to go deep. There's a ton of examples where you look at, hey, like Dante Moore is really good at checking it down here. He's really good at understanding there's nothing there. Let's pull it and get 5 yards with the legs. I think that's a big part also of like what keeps this on schedule. It's just the ability to understand and the level of decision making that to say, yes, we can hunt for deep shots. We have the ability to make those big plays. Malik Benson's an elite deep threat now. But it doesn't have to be the play when you call it.
Yeah, and Lanning talked about that even in games like the Montana State game where Dante was very controlled as a passer and taking that underneath stuff. And he said like when they did open it up against Oklahoma State, he said it wasn't that they didn't have those shots dialed up, but it was more of he was, you know, those looks weren't necessarily there for him when they did dial him up, and he played it safe and did things like taking this 5 yards on the scramble and not trying to force anything into coverage.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go to the other side of the ball, give a little bit of love to the defense here, because I am just so impressed by Tony Tuioti and the way that this defensive line, kind of development line, just keeps churning, man. It keeps working guys and the ability to get guys in spots that they can get game experience. You look at some of these guys like Blake Rushing, Elijah Rushing, Blake Purchase.
There we go.
Like they're able to get snaps in this offense, and then you see it turn into guys like Mateo, like Tatum Tuioti, like Amari Washington, who got those snaps last year, and now are part of one of the just best defensive lines in college football. The ability that Oregon has to develop pass rushers and guys who, like Amari Washington, can just eat double teams. We saw even how quickly Bear Alexander was able to pick up and get in a system that works for him and be really, really strong against Penn State. That has just impressed me so much. It's one of the reasons I think I took him first overall in our precision draft back at the start of the season.
Bear Alexander is the name I was about to mention before you did, and just it's similar with guys like Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell last year to be able to develop them just within a year. I'm not saying those guys didn't have talent before. The talent was obviously there to be able to kind of unlock that and find their best results on the field that they've had throughout their careers has been impressive. And the consistency of guys like Tatum Tuioti and Mateo Uiagalelei, who not only were they starters for this team last year, but have continued to improve things and add things to their game, becoming better pass rushers, becoming better run defenders. Like you said, it's why it's one of kind of the foundation of the strength of this team. It starts in the trenches on either side of the ball. That's why both of us had to take something from the offensive line and the defensive line here.
Yeah. All right. What's your question, Mark?
For me, the thing that I look to is how do you continue to improve and kind of find that hunger and that I don't know, that attitude, that willingness when you don't have another ranked opponent after Indiana on the schedule. It's not saying that Dan Lanning does a phenomenal job at getting his teams up for these games, but when you're not going to be challenged like that throughout the rest of the season necessarily, how do you continue to find ways to improve and be ready for when you are challenged like that in the Big Ten championship game and in the postseason? That's where the question mark is for me right now. I just want to continue to see that as we go. Can they find those little things to continue to improve on, even when the teams that they're playing aren't necessarily meeting their level?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to the secondary. We talked about it a little bit already, but just it's not a unit that we've seen especially tested yet. We expected Penn State to try to run the ball a lot, and when the Nittany Lions really couldn't get the run going, it left them in third and long, second and long a lot of the time, and was able to let the Ducks kind of like keep this passing attack that we thought maybe hey could test them deep. Just kept it in front of them. They were able to just put a shell over the top and only got burned a couple times for explosives late in the game. I'm curious because Indiana is probably the best passing attack, certainly some of the best wide receivers the Ducks will see this year and have seen so far. I'm curious how much these guys could test it because they're not guys that are especially easy to beat physically. But if there's a way that Cignetti and this Indiana unit can just confuse them a little bit, it's not.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where the weakness would lie in the secondary. It's just because these guys are young guys. Penn State was trying to do that in terms of the motion they use and using those quick snaps at the line of scrimmage. And then the Ducks did a good job of handling that. And that's something that going back to last season, Dan Lanning knew that was a point of emphasis for them because of things that happened in the Big Ten championship game. He made it a point of emphasis for the defensive line to have their hand in the dirt and be ready against Penn State. So I think they can continue to work on that, but that will be the question against a team like Penn State or a team like Indiana that's especially going to challenge you in terms of your thinking and dealing with these RPOs and reading out what they do on offense.
Absolutely. Well, those are our question marks and exclamation points. It just a good season. It's you can't say anything else for these Ducks so far, but it's the biggest matchup. We're going to get into that a little bit later.